How you doing? Oh, how you doing? Wanted glasses? Hey, look at that. Tennessee fans still wondering what that is. That's a playoff helmet, dummy. You don't know nothing about it, ball man. Uh, Kansas versus Arkansas. I know this isn't a game that is like super high on people's radar, but I wanted to talk about this game for a couple of different reasons. Let me give you the reasons first, then we'll talk about each of the reasons. Reason number one, this is Kansas' first time in a bowl game in some of you's lifetime, depending on how old you are. But point is, this is the first time Kansas has made a bowl game in forever and a day. I do think that's a big deal in the world of college football. I think making a bowl game should be like the minimum expectation, no matter how bad your team or program is. I don't think any goal or expectation should ever be lower than let's win 6 games and make a bowl game. Kansas has failed to do that way too long. They did it this year. I think that's a big deal. Number two, and this has more to do with Arkansas in particular, but the SEC as a whole. The SEC sucks. That's what you're hearing, right? The SEC has not done well so far in bowl season. Florida got absolutely humiliated by Oregon State. Now, you can tell me Florida had opt-outs. Florida wasn't interested in the game. Oregon State was like had the best year maybe they've ever had at like 9-3. They were a really good team, and Florida was terrible at 6-6. So no, yeah, of course Oregon State. You can tell me all that, but the point is, Florida, an SEC team, lost bad, and got humiliated and embarrassed. Missouri, a bottom-rung SEC team, I'll admit, a bottom-rung SEC team, loses to Wake Forest. And you can make what you will of Wake Forest. Well, they've had two of the best years they've had in a long time. Missouri had another terrible year. Wake Forest has an amazing offense. Mizzou is terrible, blah, 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 blah. Of course, Wake Forest won. Okay, fine, you can tell me all that, but the point is, they lost. SEC 0-2 in bowl games. Now, look, there's not a bigger SEC homer on the internet than Uncle Lou. I love to pound my chest and point out all the different ways in which the SEC is dominant in the world of college football. I still believe those things are true. I do think the SEC is the best conference. I believe the SEC is the toughest conference. I believe the SEC's got the most talent. I believe the SEC's got the best coaches. You look at the NFL draft, look at the national titles, look at the playoff appearances, look at the playoff records. The SEC is something like 13-5 in playoff games. The Big 12, the Big 10 is like 2-5 or something. It's just a ridiculous margin there between the two conferences that most people consider to be the best two conferences during the playoff era. So I agree, the SEC is better, is the best. This isn't, I'm not denying any of that. But, it's also true that the SEC is sucking hind tip when it comes to these bowl games. They didn't have a great record last year in bowl season, right? They're off to an 0-2 start this year. And now you got the Kansas-Arkansas game coming up tomorrow, Kansas-Arkansas game coming up tomorrow. And what I think is going to provide the SEC with a very real possibility of starting 0-3 in the bowls. I'm going to talk about that game here in a second, but let's stick to just the SEC thing here first. You can tell me that, well, no one cares about the bowl games anymore. That's why, what? So the SEC cares less about the bowl games? This whole bowl games doesn't matter thing, is that something specific to the SEC? No. This is a problem plaguing all of college football. That's not an excuse. Well, such and such team had players sitting out and the other team didn't. Well, don't have quitters on your team. The point I'm making is, some of the reasons that you people are pointing out for the SEC losing these bowl games are legitimate reasons. It just doesn't change the fact that the SEC lost. And look, we have ran around in years where the SEC dominated bowl season and bragged about it. You've done it. You can't now say it doesn't matter when the SEC is doing bad in bowls. It can't be one or the other. You got to stay consistent with it from year to year, okay? Every college football fan at this point in time understands what bowl season is. We get it. You don't have to reiterate that 25 times when the SEC loses a game. We know what bowl season is, okay? But, like I said, we have been pointing and propping up the SEC when they have a great bowl record. You got to take the incoming fire when the SEC has a bad bowl record. This is one of my biggest pet peeves about college football fans in general sometimes is when it's their turn to take an L, they have a hard time doing it. Now, you say whatever you want about Uncle Lou, and there's plenty to say. and a lot of it's bad, okay? But one thing no one can ever say about Uncle Lou is he runs from an L. He dodges an L. He makes excuses for an L. I've got 7 years worth of video proof that I don't do that. Whether it's Georgia losing a game, whether it's me getting a prediction wrong about some other game, whatever it is, whether it's the SEC taking a couple of lumps like they're doing right now. Uncle Lou doesn't run and hide, Uncle Lou doesn't make excuses, and Uncle Lou doesn't change the rules just to justify just to justify a certain outcome. The SEC has not performed well in bowl season over the last couple of years. To me, the reasons are irrelevant. Just because some of the reasons y'all are listing have some validity, yeah, Florida had a bunch of players sitting out, and they weren't very good. Oregon State had no players sitting out and was pretty good. Yes, all that's true. But the SEC still took a loss in the bowl game. Same, Wake Forest and Mizzou, same thing. Well, Missouri's not any good. But they're in the SEC, though. Isn't that kind of our point? Yeah, Missouri's not any good. Why? To play an SEC schedule, it's tough, so they ought to be able to handle Wake Forest, right? Didn't happen. 0-2, and a very good possibility of going 0-3 with the Kansas-Arkansas game coming up tomorrow. Now, let's talk about this Kansas-Arkansas game. I found myself pulling for Kansas a lot during the season this year, especially early on. It just was a good story. And, you know, one of the phrases or terms I use on here all the time when it comes to college football is, yeah, Georgia's my favorite team, no question about it. But I'm a college football fan first. And that statement is true today as it ever has been. And one of the things I love about college football is these great storylines we get every single year. We don't always know what the storylines are going to be heading into a year, but we always get some. And one of the best storylines of this past season was in week 5 or 6, when you started looking at the rankings and you saw an undefeated Kansas, an undefeated Duke, an undefeated Syracuse. Vandy had already won 3 games. You're like, what in the world is going on here? It made for a good story. And I don't know what the numbers are, but I guarantee you more people watched Kansas play football this season than the last 4 or 5 seasons combined. Because once they got to 2-0, 3-0, 4-0, people were paying attention. People were paying attention. Now, the season did not end the way they had hoped, especially considering the way it started. I think they started 5-0 and lost 5 of their last 7 games or something and ended up 7-5 or 6-6 or whatever they were. So it's not, were they a top 10 team? No. But again, this is Kansas we're talking about, a team that hasn't won more than 2 or 3 games, and I can't even remember when. And now here they are in a bowl game against who? Arkansas. Now, while Arkansas I would consider to be a better program overall than Kansas over the last 10 to 15 years, it hasn't been great. It's a similar story. In other words, Arkansas has experienced a similar storyline over the last 2 or 3 years that Kansas is experiencing now. Arkansas was kind of an afterthought in the SEC when they brought Sam Pittman in a few years ago. They had they were terrible. They brought in Chad Morris. He somehow made them worse, which I still don't really understand how that was possible. But he did. They were just a terrible team. They went something like 3 years in a row with a total of 1 SEC win or just something crazy like that. Sam Pittman comes in, and are they winning 10 games? No. Are they winning divisions or making playoffs? No. But they're a consistent bowl team now with capabilities of winning 8, 9, 10 games. Again, fell a little short this year based off of what they wanted to do, but a very similar underdog type storyline attached to Arkansas the last few years that we've seen attached to Kansas this year. Makes for an interesting game. Now, this isn't an excuse, it's just pointing out reality. Arkansas is missing a lot in this game. I think they've had 23 players enter the portal. That's a lot. They're missing a couple of their best players off of the defense who have already declared for the NFL draft and opted out of this bowl game. I think linebacker Drew Sanders, maybe one more. KJ Jefferson is expected to play. Everybody's going to play for Kansas. And here's the thing, forget about opt-outs for a second. Even before opt-outs became an influencing factor on who was going to win bowl games, motivation, especially in the lower to mid-tier bowl games, motivation has always been a huge determining factor when it comes to picking winners in bowl games, in my opinion. You've got certain teams that look at a certain bowl game a certain way, right? They're either excited for the opportunity to participate in that particular bowl game, or they kind of look down on it like, man, I can't believe we're stuck in the whatever bowl. And no matter how good or bad your program is, there are bowls that could fall into either of those categories. Take Alabama this year, right? The Sugar Bowl is a huge game. For 50 years, the best you could do in the SEC was to wind up in the Sugar Bowl. That was your dream at the beginning of every season. That's not the case now with the college football playoffs. So you look at a team like Alabama, who's used to being in the playoffs every single year. How motivated are they to play in the Sugar Bowl, right? And I'm not saying that to knock Alabama. I'm using it as an example. So you look at this bowl game here. Arkansas wins, 8 games last year? They appear to be on an upward trajectory. This is a down year compared to that for Arkansas. They're looking at this bowl game 2 days after Christmas and going, man, how did we end up here? You know, we thought we had a chance at a New Year's Six game, or at least a closer to New Year's type game. Didn't work out. Kansas, on the other hand, if you'd have told them the day before the season started they were going to be playing in a nothing bowl 2 days after Christmas, they'd have done a cartwheel and a backflip. In other words, they couldn't be happier to be here. I think Kansas has the huge motivational factor in this game. The want to be there edge clearly, I think, goes to Kansas in this game. And to be honest, I'm not sure that Kansas just isn't a better team all around this year than what we saw from Arkansas. I think Arkansas, if you want to go look full strength versus full strength, which again, this game is not, but I think Arkansas has a clear advantage over Kansas if you're trying to compare the two teams when it comes to lines of scrimmage. But Kansas offensively has been a fun team to watch this year. And Arkansas, who's been a team that's played pretty good defense over the last few years, not quite as good this year, it seemed like, as they had been in years past. And offensively, I think they took an even bigger step back. But so it could be that Kansas is just a better team anyway. I think Kansas wins this game. Arkansas, I believe, is about a 3-point favorite in this game. I don't understand why, unless it's just the fact that Arkansas is attached to the SEC. So I don't know, SEC fans, what do y'all think? You can let me know. Again, there's no bigger SEC homer than Uncle Lou, and I'll be pulling for Sam Pittman and the Hogs to pull this thing out over Kansas, reluctantly, because Kansas has been a great story, and I've had fun kind of cheering for Kansas this year in some of their games. But the SEC homer in me won't allow me to do that in this game. I'll be pulling for Arkansas, but I just have a feeling Kansas is going to get the job done. It's been a long time since they've been in a bowl game. I think they're motivated. I think they're ready to kick this thing off and play it. And Arkansas, I think, has sort of turned the page and already looking towards next season, unfortunately. And I think that's going to equal a close loss for Arkansas. I like Kansas. I think this will be a good game. I think this will be an entertaining game. I'll be live streaming this game tomorrow. I'm live streaming 5 days in a row. I'm live streaming football games 5 days in a row. Not today, Monday, but Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. There are great games on every single day. I'm going to be live streaming football games 5 days in a row, Tuesday through Saturday. And the majority of those days, I'm live streaming 2 separate time slots. A couple of those days, I'm live streaming from because you got bowl games come on at weird times sometimes. So you'll have like a bowl game that comes on at 5 or 5:30. And then another one maybe that comes on at 8. So on a couple of those days, I'm going to be live streaming from basically like 5 in the afternoon till midnight. So if you're going to be watching some of these bowl games coming up this week, leading up to the playoff games, of course, on Saturday, New Year's Eve, come hang out with us here on the channel. We have a great time watching these football games during the live streams. If there's a reason you haven't checked out the Uncle Lou game streams. You really should give it a try. We have a great time. We don't just talk about the game that happens to be on at the time either. We talk about all kinds of stuff college football related. So come hang out with us this week on these live streams. We're going to have a great time with it. But that's my pick for this game. I think the SEC now is 0-3 in the bowl games. Look, SEC people, we got to take this one on the chin. We got to take the L here. It's not a good start to bowl season for the SEC.